Hello and welcome to the third part of the landscape from the real-world Lidar data tutorial. In this part, we're going to talk about the Unreal part of the process, creation of the landscape and landscape material instance, and so on. So let's get back to the test level that I created in the end of the first video where we created the height map. So let's just jump right into it. On a side note, I must say that I was hesitant about even starting to create this series because there are so many tutorials about this topic. But I was asked to show my process, and I will. And while I, of course, adopted many good techniques from other creators, I think that I assembled them in a way that better than many of those, at least much better for me, which allows me to create new landscapes and new materials easily, though maybe it doesn't look that pretty. So this was what we got in the end of the first tutorial. The landscape increased in size. If you don't know why there are these numbers here, jump back to the first part and watch it. Also, in the end of the second part, we got our material layers for dirt, forest, gravel, rock, and snow, and height map. The grass, I specifically didn't create a grass layer because in this landscape, grass layer is the base one, so it will be the default. Okay, let's get back to Unreal. And first we need to raise the landscape to appropriate height. And if you didn't know, you can use math operations in the cells in location parameters. So like we can multiply it by 10. And Unreal will calculate it correctly. Okay, it's not enough. Let's multiply by another 10. By 1.5. Yeah, I think this is good enough. So this is our landscape. Let's create material for it, which will utilize the weight maps that we created last time. So here's my folder. I already have all the landscape layers and everything from the previous part, from actual creation of this project. So we'll talk about them later. I will not recreate everything because it doesn't make sense, but I will show the whole process. So we'll start from material and we'll call it m_landscape. I will do test in this time. And the first thing that we need to do is to collapse the node. So check use material attributes to have just one node. Next we need layer blend node, material layer blend. Landscape layer blend, yes. Okay, so let's start filling out the layers that we know we will need. We'll start with grass, and it will be a height blend layer. Then the next one, let's do gravel, and it will be height blend again. So how many we need? 5. Gravel, then forest, height blend, then it was also dirt, right? Dirt, forest, gravel, rock, snow, and grass. Then dirt, it will be height blend as well. Forest, so it's also a rock and snow. Yes, that looks like it. And also, what I always do, I also create the very last empty layer, which is utilizing alpha blend mode, and I call it do not use. Why I do this? Because you can read on a website of the on Unreal Engine documentation site, specifically a landscape material layer blending page, that it's always a good idea to have while blending layers, it's always good to have alpha blend as one of the layers. And while I wanted all my layers to be height blended, I just created an empty level layer that just fixes this issue. So that's why. So we have our layers, and now we need to feed information into them. How I do this is I came up with solution to not just to start to feed individual layers into it, but I created one master layer from which I make children layers filled with appropriate information for each particular layer. And then that's why the process of creation of new landscape is easy, because, for instance, I can migrate information back and forth between projects. For instance, grass is always grass. I found a good textures for grass, so I don't need to recreate it from scratch every time. I can just migrate the function for grass and call it good. So let's save this for starters and see what I mean. Well, first, here are my functions. This is the mess, but don't get scared. And I already have material function, which represents the grass. Let's jump into it. You know what? Let's start from grass simple. I'm sorry, this tutorial is gonna be a little bit messy, but I promise you, it's not that bad. So how do I do this? Simple. I create a material function, which is material function. Let's recreate each step, at least here, and I will call it ml for material layer. You can also create material layer, doesn't really matter. Grass test. And into here, to create this actual function, I need to use this parenting material function that is parenting to all of them. We'll get to it, back to it later, but let's start from this. So here we need a function call, material function call. Okay, and let's find landscape mf landscape layer simple, and we'll get to creation of this in a minute. When you will create it, you will have it. Okay, so here we have our landscape, and here we have our output. So first we output in our result, because this is how this function is built. It has two outputs. That's why we have two outputs here. And also we need to create another output. Function output. And this will be our height, which we will feed into here. But bear with me, it's not as bad. So this is our result. We can call it layer, and this will be height. We don't even have to rename them. Height. Okay. Into here we need to that's why it's complaining that it doesn't have albedo. And then also, and that's what you can see, the only required component, the only required thing that we need to put here is albedo map. And to do this, we need to create our texture sample, but you can see that it will not work, because what it needs in order for material functions to work, they cannot take texture sample as input. They need texture object. So how to deal with that? We press right click and we choose convert to texture object. And this is, now it's accepted, but now it wants a texture. So let's provide it. Let's find the texture. And this is my texture. And this, now it's not gonna give any more errors. And now this function is all set. So if we go back to our landscape, we can do another function call. And it's already, it's created my function because it was selected here in content browser. If it would not be selected, if nothing would be selected, and I will just make a function call, then it will be empty, just as before. And here we will find our grass test, and we have our height, which goes here, and our layer, which goes here. And in order to change them, we can do just that. Go here and make sort priority 1, and for this one, make priority 0, and then they will be sorted. Because otherwise they are sorted by alphabetical order. At least they should be. No, wait a second, it's vice versa. This has to be 0, and this has to be 1. Okay, now it's much better. So, and this is actually how you will proceed with this. You'll create, as I created here, material layer for dirt. Let's for forest, and so on. So this is actually becomes easy because you just following the simple rules. But of course, you cannot create a material with just diffuse texture. You need all other textures as well. And so while you know how it's built right now, let's go back to my actual function and take a look at it, just to save some time. So this is exactly the same. This is exactly the same setup for the grass. So we have our texture object for albedo, texture object for normal, and for ARD, which stands for ambient occlusion, roughness, displacement. And for this, I use the usual textures that I usually use for the grass, and also for just in case, I downloaded this texture as 8K, but it's kind of heavy, and in most cases you can deal with 4K, but I didn't know which one to choose, and so for now I imported 8K, but you can always go here into load bias index and change it. By default it's 0, and that's when you have your 8K texture fully loaded in engine all the time. But if you change it to 1, you will see that you have max in game size doubled down and resource size is way smaller. So this is how you can deal with this. Also, normal map is exactly the same with standard settings. What about the ARD or ORD? I guess you can see the changes in my approach of naming files. While this texture it's not, I mean, it's technically RGB texture, but in reality it's a combination of masks, and that's why it needs to be treated by engine in proper way. If you just leave it as the color texture, it will be interpreted wrong way, because by default Unreal uses sRGB color space, and it will change the colors. And so your especially will be visible with roughness. And it's not only about landscapes, it's about everything. If you import your masks and you do not uncheck sRGB, you are in trouble because your values will be all wrong. What I'll also do, so you might use either masks and then uncheck sRGB, or I came to conclusion that I found this information somewhere very long ago that for masks, it's always better to use BC7. It's not much heavier than masks, but the quality, compression quality and quality of the actual output, especially in displacement. In landscape, it's not that visible, but when it comes about meshes, it's very, very visible, very noticeable. So I always use BC7 compression and unchecked sRGB for any layers and for any compressed files. And as to where I got this file from, there is a wonderful site called Polyhaven, which allows to download super quality textures for free. You don't even need to, to credit them. And here you can look for grass. And yes, this is the actual texture that I'm using. Super good quality. I started to use it some time ago and pretty much use it in all my projects where I need grass. So let's get back to our material. So this is the grass sample. So we got our textures. We plug them in the slots. Then I also always use tint brightness parameter. So this is just a standard parameter. How you can make it? Press and hold 4 button and left click in any empty place. You'll have your 4 vector. You can also look for it for vector, constant for vector. So there's just 2 ways. And you might create it into parameter, so you convert it to parameter and you name it. And I'm using it by default, I'm giving it white value. So by default, it does nothing. You can adjust tint, and in alpha I store brightness. That's why RGB goes into tint slot and alpha goes into brightness. I just found it more convenient. Also, I have parameters for saturation, specular, and normal intensity. And these parameters are easy to create with hold and press and hold S and left click anywhere. So this will be your parameter. The other way to do it is hold press 1 or create constant value, right click, convert to parameter. It's the same. So with our setup for each individual layer sorted, not specifically, actually not all of them, because I'll use different setup for rocks, but let's jump into actual function, actual landscape layer simple function. And it looks probably a little bit intimidating, but again, it's not that bad. How to create this? Just the same as any material layer. Go into material and then material function and just give it some name and just open it, and there will be your function. And here you see this first standard output of the function. So what do I do here? Here first I create make material attribute node. So this is this node. And here we assemble all the information that then goes as just one big block in here. I will close this grass because we don't need it. We'll use this one instead as example. So I created, so this is the compressed version of this monstrosity. So material attributes. So you see it's not as bad. It just uses our standard things. It uses our base color. It uses specular, roughness, normal, and ambient occlusion. So all our regular stuff for material creation. Why it's so complicated? Because I'm using the same data from textures, but I use them I separate them into near and far textures, because when I do my landscape, I want the tiling not to be that obvious. So I want to see the textures in the distance to be much bigger and tile at different with different multiplier. So the repetition would not be as apparent. There are many ways, I've seen many ways of dealing with repetition, and I kind of just came to conclusion that I like this method the most because it's simple and because it works in absolutely most cases. That's why I'm just using it, and yes, and it serves me well. And when you see a lot of inputs here, it's only because we need to create them as variables for this setup. So let's just get closer look at it. Well, I guess start from left. So first we need coordinates, landscape coordinates for our textures to be applied. Again, you can use landscape material coordinates, but I came to using just absolute world position because I just like that it seamlessly tiles. Like especially if you have several landscapes next to each other or something, it's much better with dealing with connecting two pieces together. So I multiplied it by small number to have the not to have two tiny numbers for tiling. And I'm sorry I'm stuttering and just I'm trying to explain it, to make it as short as possible and at the same time explain it somewhat. So first I use absolute world position, and this node is just world position node. You cannot start typing absolute, you will not find it. So here it is. So absolute world position node multiplied by smaller number, and we mask it. So we only will have texture coordinate, R and G values. So this is our setup to replace landscape coordinate. And then here, instead of just like multiplying by 5, we cannot just multiply because we need to have input available for us to change for each layer. That's why we need to introduce all these inputs. So instead of doing this, we have to introduce this setup. So how to do input functionality? Just right click, input, and you will find function input. So by default it's vector 3, but here we need a scalar input. So just we'll select scalar and we'll give it a name, tiling, and we'll give it number 1 here, 0 here, right? Well, or 5. I mean, here I have previews already working in, and I have the checkbox to use preview value as default. Weird, it's not changing. Huh. This is really weird. Sorry about this. I wonder. Well, I guess I had 5 input there before. This is how it worked. And this is how when we put this tile in. So we do have a default value, and when we check this checkbox, when we have it checked, here in our landscape layer, it becomes, where is our tiling? This is our tiling. It becomes gray by default. So even if you don't plug anything in here, it will use a default value of 5. So that's why it's gray. That's why it's not necessary. So now we multiplying our landscape coordinates with our tiling parameter, and from here this is our coordinates for our textures, for our UVs for the textures. In here, just to make it simpler, actually you can see there is even nothing, and you can see values only because we have input here as well, because just as before we need input here. That's why we use again function input texture 2D. You give it a name, and I plug in texture object, which is as you've seen how we created it before. And here I use my default albedo texture. So let's see, assets, I'm always trying to use, okay, I'm always trying to use default textures. They're just tiny little textures, 16 by 16, could be smaller. Just white for albedo, standard blue for normal, and yellow for IRS. So it's roughness, ambient occlusion, and height. Height is I'm using it black. So those are my default textures that I'm trying to have in every project, in every material, not to be able. So if I need to delete some texture that I don't need anymore, I would not need to go and track where it's used if I'm using default everywhere. So that's why I have it to default here. Okay, so you can see that for normal I have preview value checked, but for albedo I don't. That's why here it's the only one a bright input, because it's required. So we use to be able to plug texture object into texture sample, that's why we kind of specify it. So we have it separated for our texture sample. We have UVs in UV slot, which we don't use usually, and then we put, and then we do something that we usually don't do. We plug our texture object into texture object slot. So this is the setup. So you have texture object for albedo, texture object for normals, and texture object for ARD, ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement. So this part is done. So this is an absolute copy of this. So far our setup is exactly the same. But what we also have, let's get back for a moment. So here we looked into tiling near parameter, and here is our tiling far parameter. That's why we need two sets of textures. And yeah, so I guess this is clear so far. Let's look what we have here. Here we have the whole set of inputs. We have our input tint, and its function input vector 3, and it has default value. We have our scalar for brightness, for saturation, for specular, and for normal's intensity. As you can see, we already have covered all of our inputs. And now what we only need to see is track our changes the way they go. So let's look at diffuse first, or our albedo. Oh, by the way, all the textures, I'm always setting them to the type of to the appropriate type. So texture sample for albedo has to be color. For normal has to be normal. For IRS has to be linear color. That's because of BC7 compression. If you will have masks, then you'll have masks instead. So make sure that you have them set up correctly. But if you don't, the engine will let you know. It will throw you an error that it has to be like linear color, or it has to be set as masks. And what I also always do is mark all the textures as shared wrap instead of default from texture asset. This allows to use more textures. I think the limit is like 16, and shared wrap allows to use like, I don't know, infinite number. At least I never ran out of textures for any of the projects. The same is absolutely the same situation is right here. And with the beauty of this is all of this information will be passed in all of our assets, so we only need really to make it once. And when you set it up, then you just migrate it to your different projects and you never have to do it again. Okay, so let's take a look where it goes. So we have our saturation, we invert it, it goes into here, we invert it, because it's just because this node desaturation is about actual desaturation, as it says, but for me it's just psychologically easier to deal with saturation. That's why I prefer to have it that way. I just do one minus node, and then I'm dealing with actual standard saturation when 1 is saturated and 0 is not saturated, not vice versa. And our saturated texture goes into multiplier and is being multiplied with our tint texture, with our tint value, because as you can see, tint is separate from brightness in here, but it is the same node here. It's just getting plugged into different slots. Okay, so this is our tint. It's multiplied with our diffuse. Then our brightness is multiplied further, and then it goes into lerp for diffuse. And lerp will be lerping, this node will be lerping between choosing which version of the texture to show, near version or far version. And we'll get back to it a little bit later, not to lose a track of what we're doing here. So then we have our specular, and specular goes into MF landscape specular node function. This is and it's multiplied by albedo, I guess. Usually I don't know why I'm using albedo. Usually it's only like red channel or inversion of roughness channel. I honestly don't know why it's albedo. This is weird. It shouldn't be this way. But I guess it worked before, so I'll just leave it for now like this. But I know that usually it's it's super weird. So a landscape specular function. How to make it? You just go into your functions folder and create standard function as we did before, but let's look at what it is. I remember that I came across information about landscape dealing with landscape specular issue. I think it was in video of Unreal Sensei. He was talking about this weird glares of the newly created landscape, and this is the function. I'm pretty sure that this is the one that I looked at how he was doing. So here we have, oh, this is why, because we need, yes, this is where we separated. Okay, this explains it. I did it long ago. Sorry, I forgot why it was RGB, the whole thing, not just one channel. So here we have our diffuse or albedo map. We component mask only red channel, then we clump it, then we multiply it by the parameter correct specular amount. This is our input specular with its default value. So this one. And here we look into at angle at which we look at our landscape, and we make textures to be more or less specular. So like if you look at more grazing angle, it will become less specular. This is very useful in case when you have like puddles or muddy ground. So you would not just kill it completely everywhere, but it just, yeah, like you have to try and see for yourself how it works. Custom specular parameter. Yeah, so this is our result of the landscape specular. Kudos to Unreal Sensei for this information and this setup. Okay, let's get back to our landscape. So landscape specular goes into specular lerp into A node. Then we have our normals intensity. And for normals intensity, there's a standard Unreal function which is called flatten normal. But again, it's make normals flatter, and our goal is make them more intense. That's why we take our input, our parameter, and we invert it 1- to make it not flatness but bumpiness, and it goes into lerp with normal. Then we have our roughness and ambient occlusion and stuff. So ambient occlusion just goes the way it is into AO lerp over here. Then roughness over here goes into roughness lerp, and all of them go into A. And displacement goes into height lerp because because we need it separate. Okay, the same with far. We do exactly the same manipulations. We deal with the saturation, then we multiply it by tint, and then we multiply it by brightness, and then it goes into B. And the same with specular. We have another specular which goes into B of specular, and then we have our normals and all our guys from here. So now we have our lerps, and we need alpha for this lerp. So we need to actually let the engine know when to stop showing near texture and start showing far texture. And this is our setup for this. So we have mf distant blend function, which looks like this. So we have, again, here we have our scalar parameter. You already know how to create it. And we have our fall off start and fall off end. So this is where fall off start is distance from the camera where textures will start to blend, because we don't want to have sharp separation of them. We need to blend them smoothly. So this is the distance from camera to start blending, and this is the distance to stop blending. And pixel depth shows the actual distance from the camera. Again, maybe it's not the best setup, but it's, I guess, most useful for me. And that's pretty much it. We have our results of distant blend plugged into alpha of all of our lerps, and then all the lerps go into appropriate slots and 0 into metallic, because by default Unreal makes metallic 0.5 as far as I remember. And then the results of this material attribute goes into our results. And so this is the standard output, result with distance blend. And I'll explain later why I have the distinction between them. And this goes into height with the distance blend. And this is how we have our material set up. Okay, let's then go back here and add the rest of our materials. So what we have, gravel, and you can see from the start that gravel looks more complex than grass material. Let's get into it. Don't worry, we'll get there some way. So let's get into here. So before that, we were looking into simplified material layer node. This is actually exactly the same material, just the nodes in the different places, but it's exactly the same setup, with the one difference. Here I have a separate make material attributes node with all the only near materials plugged. And again, I'll explain later why at some point I had to do this. Not for this scene, for other scenes, but I still decided to show different potentials and different ways that I'm approaching landscapes, depending on what's the goal, and depending on if I have weight maps or not. So the only difference, as I said, so this is our setup that I already showed. Just everything just a little bit more compressed. And this is the second material attributes node with only near stuff plugged in. So what we plugged into lerps, all the same we plug into here. And here we have, that's why we have 4 outputs. So we have output result without distance blend and height without a distance blend. And we have the, as before, result with distance blend and height with distance blend. So that's the difference. In our case, we need only results with distance blend. Now let's get our forest. So in reality, these 2 nodes are exactly the same as these 2 nodes, only these ones are different. Now we need our forest. And it's the same. And our dirt. I will actually use dirt simple based on simpler setup, because as I said, more complex setup, I only left it to show it. So if you know that in your case you will only use like Lidar data, if you use pre-made weight maps, you don't need to have this two separate setups. Okay, so dirt, then rock, and snow. And finally, we're getting somewhere. And snow. And to see at least, you know what? Let's first at least get some results, and then we'll look into nodes. We'll look into this layers more closely. Okay, with our landscape saved, let's first create a landscape material instance so we can easily change our, what is this? And this is nothing. So we can easily change our values on the fly. So right click, create material instance, and let's call it MI landscape test. And you can see all of our parameters ready to be changed. So let's apply this material to the landscape first. Scroll down and MI landscape test. And it will be black when it's done. It's black because our landscape doesn't have any landscape information, landscape layer information yet. That's why it's, yeah, it looks like this. And we will go into, well, first we don't need cinematic. Let's go into landscape mode and see what we have. Well, we have our layers, but all of them are empty. And all of them already ready to use. So we only need to connect them. And these layers, they are coming from our landscape test. So as soon as you set up your landscape material, you'll have your layers ready. So what we need to do now is we need to create info layers for each one of them. So the special file of Unreal that will remember, like if we paint landscape or if we apply a weight map, something needs to remember where this painting occurred or what are the white and black values of the mask. So to do that, we press plus and we use weight blended layer, so normal. Non-weight blended are useful in some cases, which we'll get to later. Hopefully it will not be 5 hours tutorial. So I already have a bunch of them, but let's do test. Let's start over. So we create our grass layer info, save. Already exists. Not, hold on, this is the one. Okay, you know what? Let's just rename it. You will not have this issue when you're working with a new landscape. Save. Let's give it a second to think. Okay, so you see it is created. Save all, just in case. And you can also see that it's already full of grass. Let's apply all our other layers. And we'll do test. I wonder why it went into wrong folder. This is so weird. Okay, new for forest. Into test. It's really strange, but fine. Unreal, it's okay. Oops. No, this is my old layer info. We need to create a new one. Wet blended. Test. Okay. By the way, if my keyboard is too loud, I'm sorry. The microphone is set up to only pick up the speech from this end, but I noticed that in previous video the keyboard was a little bit too loud, but I'm afraid nothing I can do about it really. Okay, so now we have our layers, and we need to apply our information from the weight maps that we created last time. Okay, so if for some reason your landscape is not being filled with your first layer, as it did in my case, what you can do is right click, fill layer. So what you need to do first, you need to fill the very first layer, the one that doesn't have weight maps, the one that is default. Then for let's deal with, I don't know, okay, gravel. Let's go right click, and we need to import from and export to file over here. Okay, so for gravel, we might as well do all of them. And here are our wet maps created before. So this is wet map for no layer info. What do you mean? I do have layer info right here. And still took the file. Well, I don't know. Forest. Oh. Dirt. Rock. And snow. And do not use is empty, and that's it. Oh, by the way, sometimes I encountered this before. Sometimes you can have height map here empty for some reason, and it will not allow you to create layers. So just go to height map and find your file again, and it will have it. It will deal with it. Now we'll press import. Hopefully Unreal would be smarter this time. Probably I shouldn't do them all at once. But at least we can admire the results of the distance blend. You can see that texture closer to us is tiling way uglier than texture that is further from us. And we are getting some results. And these very differently colored spots are exactly the reason why I bother every time to create tint, saturation, brightness nodes for each layer separately, because it allows to fix these issues easily, right, in the engine. Because, well, I mean, I guess it's great when the textures are specifically created for the landscape, and so all the textures are balanced and perfectly ready to be used without any adjustments. But in some cases that's not the case, and for me here, having already all this set up, for me it was just easier to use parameters and adjust them the way I want them in this particular case. Okay, so now we have our layers. Let's go back to the normal mode. And it doesn't look pretty on one hand, but on the other hand, we can see that at least our weight maps are working. And we have our landscape with textures. So, well, great. I mean, this is something, but it will be better. But as a beginning, it's not too bad. All right. So let's get back to our landscape and look at a couple of other things that need to be addressed. Well, first, gravel and rock layers are made a little bit different way than the other ones. So for these ones, I have, well, I started using standard landscape layer, but then I switched to, I made another layer, another function. Instead of just standard landscape layer, I made landscape layer world aligned, because I wanted to avoid the stretchiness. Yeah, and you can really barely see it here because it's already adjusted. But if I use, let's do that actually. Where is rock? Okay, it's gravel. Let's see rock. On rock it will be easier to notice, because rock is laid word aligned as well. Let's use, you know what, gravel is already open, so let's just move all these inputs into here and try standard nodes. The thing is that our landscape, it has pretty big difference in altitudes, and so a lot of stretching that we were dealing with in Houdini, it's unavoidable, because, you know, mountains are high. And so instead of just try not to notice that, I decided to use a world aligned texture that will be, instead of normally tiling, will be projected onto surface depending on the angle, thus world aligned. And while the shaders are compiling, let's look into this. It's very similar to what I've already shown, what you had before. It's just like, this is the complex version, more complex version, where near textures have their own separate make material attributes node. But the rest is the same specular, the same dealing with normals. The only thing that is different, and the beginning is the same too, somewhat. The only difference is that we use a little bit. So for input texture, we don't use styling node. We use input texture size node for, function for near and for far tiling. And it goes not into our textures, but it goes into world aligned texture. It's a standard world aligned function. It's a standard world aligned texture. Yep. So this is the one. Unreal does it really good. So it has separate functions for world aligned texture and separate for world aligned normal. So make sure to use for normals to use specific texture, not the basic one. So just as before, we feed our texture objects into world aligned texture, and we feed our texture size into texture size slot. So texture object, texture size, that's our only inputs here. The same as here. And as output, we don't have standard XY texture. We have XYZ. That's why it can be projected onto slopes and allowed to avoid stretching. So that's why we use texture XYZ, and we use the same specular function. We have the same normal function coming from here. And while in here we have this one is a packed texture, we need to break RGB values. That's why we use component mask for R, for G, and for B, and treat them as ambient occlusion, roughness, and height map respectively. And here actually, I'm glad that it stays here. I was using, at some point I was using, I decided to make available the changes into height map, so to make this displacement more or less apparent. I mean, like when you have this, for instance, blending rocks and grass, or grass and like gravel, I wanted to be able to make the stones pop out of the grass, so to make blend not very smooth but more sharp depending on the displacement texture. And for that I just added two, let's give it a second. I added two scalar parameters, displacement offset and displacement contrast. They're standard parameters, and I use offset, so I add offset to my displacement, and I use feed contrast into exponent of power node, and then I clamp it, and then they go into height. So you might as well do as we did in other material function setup. Just feed displacement directly into height output. But I wanted more control, but it's totally not necessary at all. And yeah, it's exactly the same here. Okay, and that's it. And also for dirt, I use just cost sand texture from Polyhaven, and you can see that there is already tint and saturation, and specular is lowered, and tiling is set up. And for snow, I actually didn't even create a new specific texture. I just used the rock texture that I'm using actually for rocks. I just only what I did is I made the brightness very, very high, and I made it in material layer. So in landscape material instance. Yeah, and actually see, it's not even needed here. Okay, so for snow, there is no special texture for snow. Okay, let's look into here. And again, oops. Yeah, stretching is definitely visible. On rock it will be even more visible, but this tutorial is super long already, and I don't want it to drag even longer. So yeah, without world aligned texture, the stretching is just more apparent, and that's why I'm doing this. And you can see the results of hold on, it's here. Actually, I'm not sure that it's even changed here. No, it's for rock, gravel. I don't have it for gravel. I don't have the displacement for gravel. Right, because I don't have it because I changed the landscape. I changed the layer that we're using. Let's go back to gravel and use it world aligned node. Well, as you can see, the difference is not that stark. It's very visible on rocks though. So for rocks, I would definitely, for rocks layer, especially if you have really sharp slopes, I would definitely recommend using walled align texture instead of using the standard texture setup. And let's check what we have here. So these are my displacement contrast and displacement offset. And you can see that by changing these values, you can actually make it more, you can make edges sharper. So that was the goal of this setup. I don't know, it doesn't look that it makes much sense here, but it definitely made it back then when I was doing this, because otherwise I would not do it, right? Well, I guess with higher values, it's more apparent. Well, anyways, doesn't seem to be working very much. I don't know why. I don't know why I made it then. I get. Well, yeah, okay. With high levels, with high values, it does work. Okay, so this is the standard setup. This is what you would have in standard case, and this just allows to rocks to pop out of the grass more rocky-like instead of just being smoothly showing up gradually with like standard use case. Okay. Now let's do one thing. Like while I already showed the setup, it's already an hour long of tutorial. So let's do this. While all of these values, I just adjusted them. I adjusted them, and that's why they look the way they look. Oh, by the way, yeah, see, brightness for snow is 10. With brightness 1, it'll be just rocks. So with high brightness, bam, it's snow. Done. No separate texture required. So what I plan to do is I will feed into this landscape the material that I created for this landscape, which is this one. So we will have all my settings in it. And there are more settings, and we'll get back to it in a minute. So this is the landscape that I was using. The problem with it now is that it uses I guess it's wetness. Should be wetness, right? Oh, wait a second. It's a test landscape. Okay, you know what? Also, but I'll just confirm if I'm crazy or if I'm not. So this is my landscape, my standard, the material instance of my regular material, and we'll talk about these curves that you can see here a bit later. Oh yes, I guess this is wetness. Get closer to this one of these dark spots, and let's do. Oh yeah, okay. So I have a setup that if the area is below 0, like sea level, it becomes darker, and we'll get back to it in a minute when we'll get to my regular landscape. Although doesn't really matter, I guess, where to explain it. So let's take a look at my actual landscape material. So here you can see what we've created before. All the same layers, and do not use layer as well, spelled differently though. But also what I have, grass, snow, dirt, all of them, different order. Don't ask me why, just I guess it was just the order I was creating them. But also what I have here, so if we don't use this, if we just use this as the way we created it before, it will be a little bit different. So this is the basic material that I ended up with as a result of changing my settings. And let's look at the settings too. So for dirt, tiling, I changed tiling and I made it a little bit darker, because remember that in tint brightness in alpha we have actual brightness. So for forest, I changed the tint. I used, actually for the forest, I didn't show it, but I used the same grass textures as I'm using for actual grass, because I wanted to avoid introducing too many textures. And so what I did, I just changed, lowered saturation and changed the tint. And that's how I got this much darker. Let's turn off the height fog to have actual values, real values. So that's how I got the forest, darker forest layer. Height fraction is from RTV setup, which we're not going to discuss today at all. So for grass, I used the normal intensity, increased it a little bit to make it more bumpy. And don't pay attention to this little grass clamps. It was just, again, to show how to deal with landscape layers. I actually don't use them in my scene. Okay, so those are grass settings, and I've changed them a little bit too. I changed the tint a little bit. So this is gravel with its displacements, and saturation is changed. And here you can see for gravel we don't have tiling far and tiling near. We have texture size far and texture size near. And that's how we change the tiling of the world align textures. And here actually the setting for fall off, the one that I was talking about, that when it starts, so at fall off starts, it's when it starts to blend, and this is when it ends to blend. So we can do something like 0, and we'll have our far texture right in front of our noses. And we can do something like this. And you'll see that only very close to the camera we have our tiling, like more, less tiling texture. And we have very fast, very soon starting the, hold on a second, I will kill this grass because it's has no business being here. Just only obstructs the view. Okay, now we will be able to see clear what is going on with the landscape. So you can see that tiling starts really close to the camera. So if you low, it's like, I don't know, okay-ish. But I usually prefer to have value like 8192, and it doesn't have to be a power of 2. It's just I guess a habit. So it's a question of finding out which one works the best for each particular situation, depending on cameras, on the purpose, on everything. So, and this is how we can mostly avoid ugly tiling. It's not perfect, but to me it's a good trade-off between even more complex materials and visual quality. So this is our rock setup. I didn't even change nothing about the colors of the rocks. So this is snow setup. And this is specular values from this specular landscape specular function that I was showing before. Like we can change the angle, actual angle at which the specular changes. And I find this setup work nicely for me. So let's get back to the actual scene, I guess, or you know what, while we're in test landscape, we can also take a look into, okay, we don't need this landscape anymore. Let's look into actual landscape. And so, yeah, let's look at the wetness. Let's imagine that we want in our landscape to have a river or a lake, and we do not want to go and manually, paint darker colors into all the areas that are below the water. We can do this automatically, but of course, first you have to have your landscape at no, let's switch to the normal landscape, because I guess it's just higher than this one. That's why I have way less area being wet, so to say. Let's open actual scene. Okay, let's save. Oh, it's gonna take some time preparing textures, but don't pay attention to water. Actually, the watercolor is green. I'll switch it to, I guess, cinematic. In cinematic quality, it looks much better. It looks like water, but on epic quality, it looks green. And why do we have it? Ah, texture's not loaded yet. That's why everything is gray. Okay. Yes. So while we already have something loaded, let's talk about the wetness. So my river is at -20, so it's almost at the 0 level. I'm always trying to get stuff to make stuff work more or less close to real world. It's just easier to remember what you're doing. So yeah, in our landscape we have wetness setup, and let's look into it, how it's done. It's actually super easy. So in here we have function input, and we use the node. We use from drop down. We select function into material attributes. So into here we load everything that comes from here. So we load all the grass that we made, the whole thing, all the values of every node. We load it in. We use the node get material attributes, this one. We feed it in, and what we only need to separate base color to make some manipulations with it. So how to achieve this? We click into here. We press the plus button, and there is a layer, and base color is a default. It's first one. So here you have it. So this node separates all the rest of the material and base color. So what do we do with this? Just as usual, I create a tint node, wetness, color, variation, and brightness. It's the same for vector 4 parameter, and we multiply it first by the whole RGB value, and then separately by alpha value. So it's the same principle as tint. And we feed it into lerp node. So our standard base color coming from the grass comes into A, our adjusted color goes into B, and for alpha we use wetness setup, wetness function. Let's look into this function. So in here we have our absolute wall position, just a standard node. We have our two inputs. You have them here. Level height, wetness level height, because it would be like I could just use 0 as just not even deal with function, with inputs. But like, what if my water should start at -20, like in my case? So it's always, to me at least, it's always better to be prepared that your sea level might not be at 0, that your sea level might be at 100. And if you hard code it to 0, or maybe you have whatever case that your wet rocks should start not at the same level as wet grass or something. Well, actually, it will not help in this case. In this case, for the whole material, it will be the same wetness level. But anyways, I always feel that it's better to be prepared for choices. I mean, to some extent, of course. So here we have our two inputs. Level height, we add it to world position, and we divide it by level blur. Both of them are just standard scalar function input. Then we only take from it the B value, blue value, so like vertical parameter, and that's why you see here that you have a separation. We feed it into linear gradient. It's a standard Unreal node. We clamp it and we reverse it. And so that's how we have basically a mask where everything below certain level with a certain smoothness will be wetness, and everything above this level will be just standard material. And so we feed it into lerp, and the way lerp works is A as default, so add black values from whatever we feed into alpha, and B is only applied to white values of our alpha, and our alpha is, in this case, as you saw, just a vertical separation. And then when we created our wetness setup, we just make a node set material attributes just as get material attributes. We just press 1+, we get our base color, and so we feed our adjusted base color into here, and we feed all the rest of material attributes into here, and we put it into output. And that's how we have our wetness. And then we plug it into here. Why I did that? Initially, actually, I had the wetness set up right into landscape layers. But like in some cases, I mean, I found it being not very productive, because not for every material you would need landscape, you would need wetness. Not for every scene you would need wetness. So why to have it by default? Like in my case, I only need it for grass, really. That's why I only used it for grass. But it might be, anywhere for any level. It just made more sense to me. And hopefully now so now everything is loaded, and you can see this separation where the water is. And to me, it makes it to look more realistic. For the bottom is much darker, which is good. And let's see how we actually can use the settings. Oops, too close. Wetness. So color variation is 0.3. And if I use 1, this is how it would be without wetness. And I don't like it, and that's why I set it up. So 0.3, so we just make it darker. Technically, we could do the same in the same setup right here. We could also, in here, we could also like add another separation and use roughness. So we can actually make manipulations to roughness, and I do that in asset setup, like when stones, not in this scene, when stones are in the water, the stones have to be less rough, so they have to be like more glossy, and they have to be darker. So I actually do that for assets, but I decided not to do that for landscape, because landscape materials always super heavy as they are. So I guess the less you do, and I just saw that I could get away without dealing with roughness as well. But that's what you can do. You can, like, I don't know, multiply it by some level, by some, or add. I would say add, subtract some value, so it will be less. So it will be darker, thus more glossy, less rough, and you can feed it into alpha and use the same node as feed it into lerp, use the same node as alpha, and set it in here, make a roughness node, and feed the rest in material attributes. So it's very easy to set up if you want it. But let's get back to here. So it's darker, and it's also smooth enough to not to be, where's my cursor? Oh, Unreal, you just so yeah, you can see that here we have level blur at 20. If I do it at 0, it will be just a sharp line. And if I do this at 0, it will be just much higher. So it's 25, and it's 20 for smoothness. You can make it smoother if you want, 50 or 30. So anyways, it gives some freedom to make adjustments to the level. Now let's look into Colorize stuff, which goal is to make levels, make layers a little bit, to break them up more, to introduce more variation to the levels. And this is totally courtesy of Andini, which I already recommended before. I think that he has the whole video about using curves to colorize landscape material. So I will not explain everything super precisely, because, as I said, it's the whole video, and this is not a goal of this video. It's already explained. I'm just using pretty much precisely. I think that he uses this blend overlay that was here. I'm just using multiply, because blend overlay is ridiculously expensive and kind of stupid node. I'm just using multiply to add color. So that's the difference. But the rest is more or less like what he has. But just let's look into it, just in case. If I change something, I just don't remember. It's been a while ago. So what do? We sample height with absolute world position, only height. We use a remap range to get our values, and I actually deal with that in material. So like minimal height and maximum height at which the values that we use ourselves depending on the landscape we're dealing with, and we just remap it from 0 to 1. Here we have slope mask function. Okay, let's get back here, and you can see the rest of the nodes. They are self-explanatory. And then from absolute world position, we feed into texture variation. We take only RNG, so we make our landscape coordinate, sort of, multiplied by a very small number. Adjust scale. Scale is for the future, and it's just, so this is only to make the numbers not that horribly huge, and this is just for potentially changing the scale. The texture variation can be really any texture, and I'm using just some noise, macro variation noise texture. And here's the rest of setup, and all of this goes into these nodes: add, saturate, and now it goes into curve atlas, and we'll look into it in a second. So this is a curve node. When you create it, and I promise that I will not show it. Yeah, so here we use our, first we need to select atlas, which is landscape colors, and then a curve from this atlas, which is grass. So this is our curve, and we feed it into further nodes, and that's what we have. And then we do it the same. We get our the whole material. We only separate base color, multiply it with whatever contraption here, and feed it back into set material attributes. And let's look just for a minute really quick into actual these curves. What are they doing? So first you need to create landscape colors. So this is a curve atlas. So right click, curve atlas. Give it some name. Not even gonna bother. And then we also need to make a curve gradient. Curve, and we select color. Curve linear color. Select. So this will be our curve. Why do we need this? So we have here RGB values, and we can basically create, instead of just boring gray to white gradient, we can create all kinds of fun colors. And it will be not that necessary maybe for this landscape, but I'll show you another example of another landscape where actually it was pretty handy to have all these beautiful variations. So this is how we set up this curve atlas. And what's happening with it? It's being projected onto our landscape, onto our grass, only grass level layer of the landscape. Let me find a good position to be able to see it. So now we just have just grass, just styling grass, nothing going on. But when we turn on our Colorize, and I'm just chaining them in Colorize and then Wetness, and save it, you will see the result of actual, not this horrible curve that I created, but way more mild curve, which is this one, grass gradient. So it's kind of, you know, greenish, bluish, yellowish, reddish colors, very, very subtle. Like, yeah, like pastel, I would say, colors. Not very many of them. Just a few which are kind of, you know, can be related to the grass itself. And let's see what it does. So, and you can actually change styling and everything. Oops, that's too far. Come on. Okay, so it adds this color variation to the grass based on a height of the height position in the landscape. So anyways, go and find Andini tutorial. He has hills, and he shows it on hills, and it's kind of, it's really nice. It's way more visible than here. Oh, and also we have this noise to break it up. So when you actually, especially when you close it to the landscape, it's really visible. It really does break up the repetition and adds this nice variety to the texture. And again, maybe from perspective like this, it's not very great. But let's get back to the camera where I'm wandering. Yeah, if we get back to the camera and get out of it one day. Okay, so when you close it to the landscape, you can actually see easier these variations. So I think it's nice. And while this is saving, I'll show you an example of another landscape, Zion Park landscape, where I used a similar, by the way, like it took me, I don't know, 20 minutes to set the whole thing up because I was reusing my layers. And you can see that it's abomination, just the same But actually I do have wetness still here in this layer, though it's like desert, no wetness needed. But I just migrated. That's why I actually got rid of it. But it's an old project, so it doesn't really matter. But here in rock layer, so yeah, landscape. Landscape is super easy. That's it. Grass, sand, dirt, gravel, rock. But in rock layer here, yeah, I mean in world align texture actually, which I use only for rock, I added it right into world aligned, right into landscape layer. So you can see it's kind of flexible. Like what I did is just brought this whole setup, and in this case I was actually using, you know what, I'll show it to you. I was actually using not the regular setup, which is this. I use it as world align texture, so it will be will give me layers. It will not be projected from top to bottom as in this case. So texture is our curve atlas is projected from top to bottom with noise. That's why you can see these splotches of different colors. In here, I wanted them to be layered horizontally on these rocks. Like you can see this layers. And so that's why I'm using world align texture in here. And the rest, I think it's the same. Only here I'm not even mask. I left it here because I didn't want to I was trying to do it non-destructively. It goes both into here. Yeah. So I'm just making these stripes. Basically what I'm doing here is making stripes, horizontal stripes, with this funny little gradient with all kinds of colors. And then I feed it into my base color, and I just multiply it with it. So I just treat it as tint. And that's how I can have these stripes instead of just having a regular rock layer. Let me remove it so it will be more visible what's going on here. So instead of this, I will just use this. And now you can see that normally this is just great. This is just a simple rock texture, but it has way more colors when it has curves on top. Much funnier. Okay, let's get back to our landscape. So this is pretty much it. Except for the grass. I also usually have remove grass layer. Like if you use landscape grass, you need to have a way to get rid of the grass in certain areas. Let's see if I have it here. Yeah, I have a remove grass layer. How to create it? Well, first let's turn on the grass pack, and I just threw like okay, so this is grass. Let's go back to the foliage. Okay, and here we have right click. Oh, actually, you know what? Foliage, yes. No. Foliage. A landscape grass type. And let's call it grass. I usually try to put in like LGT for landscape, standing for landscape grass type in front to be able just to find the nodes faster and easier, but I already have one. So yeah, so this is how you create it. let's get in. And by default, it's empty. So what you do, you just press plus button and you have a setup. You can put a grass mesh in here. Let's do carnation, one of the carnations. And you can select grass density, cool distance, which is like, where it starts to disappear. Let's say from 5,000 to 10,000. Scale. So this is fun. I use it not all the time, and I actually didn't use it in this particular landscape, but again, just want to show the options because I do use it sometimes. And also important thing is instance world position offset disable. Like if you have wind, and wind is expensive, like world position offset is expensive function, so you better put in some, I don't know, 1,000, some value after which world position offset is just disappears. And so after you set up all your grasses, we can go back to our landscape. And it's getting difficult. No. Oh my God. Let's get back here. Why is everybody trying to resave? I didn't change them. Okay, landscape, now it's visible. So after we created our grass, our landscape grass layer, we can actually create landscape grass output, which is what I have here. Well, let's try a new one. And also, like, we have to place the grass only where we want the grass. We need to use our grass. So it's called, in layer blend, this is our layer name. And so we can use this to actually spawn the grass only on this layer. So let's copy and pretend that we don't have it here. And so we do sample, and it's called landscape layer sample. So we're sampling where in our landscape we have grass, and we will apply our procedural grass into it. But and this is like cool, good enough. But if you need to remove this grass somewhere, like, I don't know, on the path or in the middle of the street or something, what you can easily do is create another sample and just call it remove grass. And even if we don't have a specific layer for remove grass, it still will be created if we create a sample. And so what I do, I just subtract remove grass from sample grass, and only then I feed it into grass. And so now the procedural grass will be spawned only where we have grass, unless it has remove grass painted over. And this is a point where we'll talk for a second about non-weight blend layers. Like here, when we were creating all of our layers in Paint, yes. Well, when we were creating all of our layers, we will just always doing weight blend normal, right? But what we need to do now is create a non-weight blend layer, which means that it's a specific layer that will not be blended with. Why is that? Okay, there is no gravel info. This is like specific layer that will be painted over all of the layers. No matter, it will not be blended with them. So this is like the best use case for this. Give me a second for this, or something like snow that has to go on top of whatever without blending, really. So if we spawn our grass, I thought that I saved it. So it should be spawned. Of course it's not. Yes, it's not enough. So when we create our grass layer, it's ready to spawn whatever you tell it to spawn. And what we need to do is we need to add actual landscape grass layer thingy in here. Why it's created 2. What's going on? Okay, we don't need the second one. Let's delete it. And when we select a grass type, it already suggests only what we have. We have just one right now, so let's select it. And now it will spawn the grass for us. Again, I'm not using it always, but I'm using it sometimes. So I decided to just show how it works. So now the grass will be spawned, and a couple of carnations will be spawned everywhere in grass. Let's give it a second or two. Okay, here are our grasses. And there are plenty of them. For some reason, I thought it probably didn't set up cool distance correctly. So, remove grass. While it's... What? Remove grass, everything is set up. Why it's red? Oh, this is weird. Okay, let's try again. Okay, now it works. I don't know what was that. So if when we paint this remove grass layer, it will actually do just that. It will remove the grass. And I don't actually remember. If we paint, I don't know, a dirt. Well, yeah, as you can see, what is cool about all this is if we paint some other layer, the grass disappears because it's not supposed to be on other layers, because it only needs to be created. Oh, this is the issue, the second landscape. Okay, this is why it didn't work. I have a second small landscape because I didn't want to sculpt the first landscape manually. So I just created a tiny little one, the second one, applied exactly the same material to it, and it was just was easier to sculpt. So, okay, so I was working on it. If you have two landscapes like I do, you need to just select the correct one here. And third and fourth, it's those background landscapes, which I should do as actual meshes. And if you're interested, I can make a tutorial about how to export mountains as meshes from Houdini instead of landscapes. It was just initially it wasn't the plan, but then I decided to go with midway, and I just said that while this scene is totally cinematic, I don't need to worry about having too many landscapes or whatever. So that's why I didn't bother to actually go for the mesh route. So yeah, if we paint our, oops, that's not what I was intended to do. If we paint our remove grass, the grass will be removed. But if you want grass back here, that's the point of this level. It's not no weight blend layer. So to get the grass back, you need to press shift and kind of paint it back. So it's like we deleting and then we're restoring. This is how all of the non-weight blend layers work. Like if I was to paint the snow in here, that'll be the same process. To remove the snow, I would have to paint it back with shift. Maybe like snow is not a very particular convenient case to explain this, but if you like painting puddles, like you have specific layer for puddles, this is super convenient to paint and remove puddles. I mean, that will be the same go-to way to do this. Like, see, yeah. Okay, so we're done with this. And one more thing that I want to show while I'm edit. Where's my landscape? Snow, it needs, okay, here's landscape. One more thing that I want to show for the case where, for instance, like in some cases, I do not, let's kill grass first, so it will be easier on. This compiling shaders is like, so long. actually, speaking of grass, for my current work project, I'm making some sort of little like jungle, sort of jungle scene, and I'm using grass layers because it's super simple. You just set it up and it just spawns everywhere. And I'm using like a lot of different assets to do that. Not like, you know, 3 grasses like I did here. Here I didn't change nothing. I added this just to show the example. Okay, so we dealt with this, and this is our landscape, and this is RTV setup. There are plenty of great tutorials about RTV, so I'm not even going to get into that. But what about if you don't have, like we have, in this case, we have weight maps. So we have our forest and dirt and snow and grass and everything already made, prepared. But what if we don't have it? What if we have just a plain landscape and we need to just throw some textures on it and make them somewhat not repeatable? Like just make them like apply some noises to it to make it nicer. Unfortunately, I do not have any personal project to show this, to show the case, or at least I didn't look through them, and I don't want to do it now, and I definitely do not want to re-record this. So I'll just, and I cannot show work project, unfortunately. So I'll just explain it, and we'll see, like we'll replace one of the layers, and you'll see what I mean. So let's say that we have just a landscape, no weight blend layers, and we need to still do some rocks or some grass mixing with some dirt. So this is the case where we can use like auto material, and this is the setup for auto material for any other scene, which you can actually really easily combine with hand painted materials. So let's look into this. Let's look first into like ground, just like standard, not based on angle. Like, you know, like if the slope is more than this, then we paint rock on it. No, let's look into like standard flat things. And this is why we were using this no distance blend and distance blend nodes, because when you mix 2 different materials together, let's remove stats to make it bigger. When you mix 2 different materials, you need to mix them separately. Near blend and far blend, like mixing between each other separately, and then we get them together. So let's look into this. So we have our old friends like grass and dirt, and for our near setup we use actual no distance blend things. That's why we need, oh, this is not nice. And I probably shouldn't even try to open it because we already saw it. Yeah, that's why we need this setup, only about near. I already showed it before. So let's say we want to blend grass and dirt with just some pattern, some noise. So we use layer blend mask. I don't remember a layer blend, if it's standard or if it's created. I don't see it. You know what? Let's look into it. I really don't remember. Probably it's standard. So we have landscape coordinates. We have input for the blend size. We have multiply, texture sample, just some noise, like Perlin noise, just fine. Blend amount going into multiply, and blend power. So basically offset and contrast. Then we clamp it, and we only take red values from it because we just need like one black and white mask. Let's go back to our landscape. So we create our, and I did this like layer 2. So like layer 1, layer 2, no, layer 1, layer 2. So you will see, it will be easier to understand later. So this is like basically how we're gonna blend these two landscape materials together. So we feed them into this node, and from here we transfer this mask into heightmap mask with 2 height maps. This is the standard. I'm pretty sure this is standard function. I did so long ago. Yes, height lerp with 2 height maps. So we turn our noise, basically noise texture, into height lerp texture. So, and this goes into transition phase, and this goes into blend. So, but we cannot use lerp for materials, for actual materials. That's why we can only use blend material attributes. It's a standard node, standard Unreal node. So we feed our no distance blend into blend material attributes, and we use our height, because height is just a simple, it's not like the whole material. Height is just a simple texture. We blend it into standard node, into standard lerp, sorry, and we use the same alpha for the rest of materials and for height. So basically, like here, we feed the layer and we feed the height separately. The same with far. For the far, we have layers blend mask, the same right here as here, and we, for the far, for the far we just blend in them. We don't try to do the height lerp, because we only need height lerp to on close distance, because we only care about how nicely grass, the stones or rocks pop out of the grass only on a close distance, because we're not going to see it further away anyways. That's why for the far distance we can just use just blend, instead of using a more expensive function with height lerp. But we still need our, so here we use our result with distance blend, because we need far result, and it will be far because it will be already far from the camera. That's why it will be, by default, will be used the far part of it. So again, we feed it into material attributes and into lerp, and this is our far setup. And here we do, again, blend material attributes. So we basically manually do the work of this node. So we put our far into, our near into A, our far into B, and the same for the lerp. And we use the same distance blend function as we used before for our landscape material. I'm not going to try to, oops, no, cancel. I'm not going to try to find it. So this is how we create our auto layer based on a blend of 2 separate layers. But what if we want to have also to account for slopes? Like if we have hills, we might as well want to have rocks that will be used when slope is high enough. So how we do this? We use walled align blend. This is standard material, outer slope sharpness and not outer slope bias, feed into appropriate nodes. Then we have our rock material, which we feed into my material blend angle correct normal. So there is a standard material blend, multiply. Simple, I think. No. Layer blend. No, not landscape. Standard. Okay. Yeah. So we can, if we look into the standard function, we can see that all of the material attributes are blended. Give it a second. So this is a standard lerp. We have one material, we have another material, and they blend through standard lerp based on some alpha mask and fed back. What we need to do is, what I did is I made a copy. You shouldn't make changes into default materials. What you need to do is, like, I went to my material functions, I made a copy of that material that I just showed, material function, and I just renamed it into my material layer blend angle correct normals, just to remember that this is created by me, but it's based on standard material. And what I did is I did another input alpha for our normal. So all the rest of material will be blended with standard alpha, just as regular one that I showed before, and only normals we just, it was here, we pull it down here, and we just replace the alpha. That's it. Only alpha is different. And I saved it, and this is my custom material. You know what? I really need to close these tabs because this is just too much even for me. I'm a big fan of plenty of tabs, unfortunately, but this is too much. Okay, and we're back in the game. So we created blend our specific material layer blend. And so here from our Wall-Align blend, we feed alpha into alpha, and into alpha normal that we just created, we feed layer blend with explicit normals. This was allowed to blend like rocks with grasses and stuff more correctly. And I think this is the tip from Unreal Sensei 2. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that this was what I learned from him. Actually, I highly recommend his videos. Well, okay, so we feed our standard material, our like plain material, into angled one, and let's see what we've got. Like, let's use this material for, I don't know, for grass, and maybe for forest too. Yes, I just don't want to create another layer blend. You know what, maybe for dirt and for forest. So we will have a picture as if we don't have much. I mean, all the foreground will be covered with this auto material. And let's save it. And I'm wondering why I have RTV when it should be RVT, real-time virtual texture. That's a bummer. Just noticed that. After all these years. Okay. Let's pretend nobody saw it. Okay, let's take a look what we've got here. And everything is super slow. All right. That's why I prefer not to deal with landscape. Just set up everything once and just forget about it, because this is like obnoxious to just wait and suffer. And I cannot complain about memory. My computer is pretty good, but and also recording doesn't help. Okay, so this is our automatic material, and actually it doesn't look that bad. Like, might as well work for planes, for like flatter areas. And you can actually, like, we could add, like in here, we can feed, let's say, the grass, we could feed through wetness and get the same result. I mean, not grass, like we could feed the whole thing that, like this auto part, because I stuck it into three things, but like in my other project, I just have layer auto and height auto, and auto means this automated material. And I also have so this looks like this layer blend. This looks like this. I have auto, and then separately I have like grass, dirt, and rock. And of course I also have do not use in alpha blend, and all of them of course hide blend. So yeah, so I would feed, you know what, let's just do that. I would feed this into auto, and then separately material rock will go into rock, material rock, and height rock, grass, dirt should be height blend too. Dirt is height blend. Oh, wait a second, rock has to be, yeah, mix that up. Okay, layer rock, height rock, auto is already set up, and then I would separately have grass and dirt and width blend. Or you might as well not just drag it everywhere, but reuse the same setup. Like if we have grass and dirt here, we can recreate the same things. You know what, I'll just copy paste them. Why would I need this is because, like, if auto material is great, but sometimes you still need to do some manual, like, manual painting, because probably in most cases it will do a good enough job, by creating varied enough material. But in some cases you still need to, like, oh, I need grass here, and so then you just go select the layer of the landscape and just paint it manually. So you have like a best of two worlds. You have auto material. You don't need to create, blend weight maps in any other app, Houdini or Gaia or whatever else. You can just, get away with pretty easy setup. Now we don't have snow because I didn't create it, but the principle is the same. We have, and because the names are the same, the landscape layers just except auto shouldn't be used, because we don't have material for it. But I guess the grass is our basic one. Actually, it's interesting. I wonder which one is we using right now. Remove grass, we don't have it yet because I deleted it. So we just delete it here. I wonder why it doesn't show auto layer. It should. Probably just being slow as usual. Everything got broken. Okay. Okay, this is not good at all. Why we don't have our... I don't want to delete this because I don't want to get it broken completely. But I wonder why it doesn't. It definitely trying to do something different, but it doesn't pick it up. Usually it should pick it up. But okay, let's pretend that that's what we did from the beginning, and we have layer auto, and just instead use what I already set it up. So instead of having separate grass, dirt, and And what else I used? Forest. I placed our auto layer. Let's save. The downside of this right now, of this setup, is we cannot paint separate layers. That's why this one is preferable. But while I cannot make it work, and I do not want to start over because this is super long tutorial already. So this will be your setup if you want to have auto layer plus ability to paint manually layers when you need them. This is actually what I do with my current work project. It's exactly the setup. Okay, so let's hope that, okay, now it picked up our old setup. Oh my god, so slow. And why the layers are locked, I have no idea, because it shouldn't be this. We don't even need landscape right now at all. We just need to get back and I'm not gonna cut it out. We'll survive. Okay, let's hope it will work. It will move. Something will happen. Okay, something is happening. Because the only thing that I want to show you now is the blending options for them. There's like noise setting textures, how they will you know, tile, and the size of the texture of the noise texture that makes them blend with each other. Unbelievable. I think it's because of the recording. It's that slow. It shouldn't be really that clunky. And it wasn't in the beginning. At least didn't feel like it. Okay, let's get back to selection mode. Maybe. Okay, now something is moving. That's good. So let's take a closer look. So we have our, obviously, blending our grass and our dirt. And let's look at the settings. So you remember that we had this blending layer 1, layer 2. So layer 2 is always, I think, is always grass. And let's talk first about near. So near blend size is, so it's a very tiny size. Let's see if you can make it bigger. Don't see any changes. That's weird. Hold on a second. It's far. Oh, sorry. Near blending size. Yeah, you can definitely see the changes. So this is how you change the size of the texture, and blend power helps to adjust which layer you want more. Like grass is the layer 2, so the more amount, the less amount. Yes, the less amount, or it's still it's layer 1. Wait a second. No, grass is layer 1, dirt is level 2. I'm sorry. So the less amount we have, so at 0 we only have grass. At 1 we will only have, we should at least only have dirt. No, we don't. Why? Probably because of the power. So at 1, yeah, if power will be smaller, we will have only dirt. Yep. So that's how we just deal with it. We find our values, the one that will work for our case, and we can have like blending from very like tiny pieces to much bigger. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, it's a pretty good way to break up repetition of the textures. And even if you don't want to blend like grass with dirt, you can blend grass with another type of grass or something like that. So yeah, see that now there are like tiny, tiny, tiny islands of one texture in another. So this is like ridiculously small blending. Why it doesn't change? I don't know. Oh, okay. And now the islands are much bigger, and I like it better. And the same is with far blending. Blend power, let's say 0, and then we have only like blend amount 1.5, and we have it like everywhere. And blend amount 0, and we'll have grass everywhere. And we'll still have on the slopes, we will have our, actually gravel picks up from the layer, but on the slopes like in here, you'll see that we have rocks starting to show up. And if we would have longer and bigger slopes, we would have more of the rocks showing up. Technically, we could go and replace rocks with auto material as well and see what happens. Layer rock and height rock. And we're almost there, guys. Well, while it's preparing shaders, I want to talk about... Oh, that was not too bad. Well, okay, now we don't have rocks except for doubtful blend right now. Let's take a look at why the rocks are so grassy and how we can fix it. Well, snow, it's still snow at least. That's good. It doesn't really want to obey right click normally. Okay. Oh, almost there. Well, yeah, you can see that actually on the slopes, it's just rocks. It's like it's fine. But if you want more rocks or less rocks, that's why we have auto slope bias feature, where we can the more, as far as I remember, the more you have here, the more, yeah, you have rocks everywhere now. So usually it's I think it's like -12, -11 is like the best value to deal with. And sharpness does just that. And let's take a look somewhere closer. So yeah, you can see that where it blends not too bad. It blends with the grass, I mean, not too bad. Gravel is old layer. Well, yeah, okay, so let's decide that we've discussed that. So this is one other way, but it works, actually. It works really good for smaller landscapes. You know, just throw in some auto layer, make a opportunity to have manual layers, paint several of them, maybe you know, just blend automatically like 2 and have a couple more like some super wet dirt or puddles being able to apply manually, and you'll be all set. But for super big landscapes like this, I don't think that auto material would work here. That's why for this particular project, I opted into using weight maps and using masks. And even if you don't use real world data, still Houdini has, with all the masks that we were discussing previous time, all these maps, they were created from just from height data, all this gravel and rock layers. So, but you don't have to feed in the actual height data from real world. You can just create some height information just by throwing in noises. So first you create your height map, and then from that, even from any fantasy landscape, you'll get your masks the same way. That's why Houdini is versatile in this, with this. Rock layer is rock layer no matter if you apply it to, if you extracting this information from real world Lidar scan or from some height map masks, height map noises thrown into the pot. So yeah, but for big landscapes, I would definitely go for trying to emulate like all these different layers of landscapes in nature, all this, gravel and forest and snow and everything. So I don't think that auto landscape will cut it. But for small landscapes, definitely yes. It might be just the fastest solution, just especially if you don't see much of the landscape anyways, like jungle scene. Like who looks into, you don't even see horizon, you just see trees and forest floor. And before I call it good, I want to discuss one more thing about landscapes. In some cases, you might have actual picture, a texture of the landscape that you have, and I'll show the example of. It's not from this project, but I just didn't want. I knew that it's gonna drag, so I imported. Hopefully, I did. I think I did. At least I was going to. A texture from different project with oh, you know what, I'll import it now then. Though it's weird because I was sure that I imported from different project where I was like recreating an island, and I had texture for this island, actual RGB representation of it. Let's see. So yeah, this, and I wanted to apply the whole thing to the landscape, without just making like grass layers or something. So I had a landscape made with height map. Actually, it was from Tangram height mapper. Like if you don't have Houdini, you can use Tangram height mapper to find real world data. It exports into TIFF. The resolution is not that awesome, but it's still doable. Like for this project, it worked. So how to use actual texture for the landscape? Let's do this. So we'll use a texture sample. And this is our texture because it was selected in the thing. And to apply it to the landscape, you cannot use standard texture coordinate. You need to use landscape coordinate. Landscape layer coordinate? No. Yes. Landscape layer coordinate. By the way, texture has to be actually, yeah, it can be whatever, but we need to make sure that the texture has the size of our landscape. So in our case, our landscape is 4033, and that's what we put into our, I think it's mapping scale. And we plug it in here, and we'll plug it into let's see what to do the best. What will be the best here, because we don't need tiling, and it will take it. Okay, let's see if it will work. If not, I'll just open the project and take a look how I did it there. Doesn't look like it changed anything. Oh, wait a second. It's not that. Yeah, it's not that layer blend. Cannot mix material attributes. Yeah, okay, let's do quick blend material attributes. No, 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 no. Make. What about this? Oh, you know what? No. I'm just being weird. We can do this. Just uncheck use material attributes and just plug it into the base color. And undo this to avoid error. Okay, let's see. Well, of course, it would not make sense with this landscape. But if we had a correct height map, we would use this. We could use this as our base layer. And actually, it's like a best way to avoid repetition and everything, because we already have like the full texture of the landscape. And then what we can do, to avoid this, let me turn on camera and then turn it off for a second to just get closer to the location. So even though this texture is not from this landscape, and we don't have set up anything else except, and you can see how shiny the landscape is without specular correction, which we did in layers. So you can still see the potential of it. You can still see that we have pretty nice colors, and they would help to avoid all these texture repetitions. But what we need to do to make it beautiful from the close distance is to blend it with like repeatable texture of, like, I don't know, of grass texture. Just like make grass texture. Make grass texture, let's say, totally desaturated, or just use a normal map from it and blend it with this our texture map. And actually, there is a plugin for Houdini. It was pointed out by one of the viewers under my first video. So if you're interested in this plugin, I forgot the name. Go and look into comment section of the first video. So basically, when you turn on this plugin for Houdini, it looks for real world data, just as similar to what we did before. And the best part is that it outputs the texture like this. So the resolution is not great, or if you want to have a good resolution, you need to stitch together a lot of these pieces of the landscape, like we did for Switzerland. But for Lidar data for some countries, you can find one chunk of information. And for this thing, I think the maximum resolution that they allow is 512 per tile, which is not much. Like for this landscape, you would still need to have, 64? I think, yes, I used 2 meters per pixel. And in that case, you would still need to use 8 by 8, so 64 tiles. So it's still a lot of stitching, but as output, it has the texture like this. And this is the way to use these textures like that with the landscape. So not a texture coordinate, but landscape coordinate node with the multiplier, with the scale of the actual size of your landscape. And I think that's it. 2 hours and 31 minutes. Wow. But I will cut out all this suffering with closing the tabs. So, well, I'm glad that we're done with this. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. And see you next time. Good luck.